Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Admiral, what I'm about to say is all from open source information. I'm going to demote you for a minute. So a year from now, you're the commander of the Gerald Ford on patrol off the east coast of Iceland. It's early in the morning, and you learn that a hypersonic missile has just been launched from Murmansk. You have 13 to 15 minutes to react. The missile is traveling at 6,000 miles an hour. It creates a plasma shield so that radar is useless. The only sensor is infrared, and we have inadequate infrared overhead architecture. What do you do?
Defend myself as best I can, sir. It's a hypothetical. I have to take a deeper look at the capabilities that we have and what I could throw up against it. But I have a responsibility to defend. We have a responsibility to defend ourselves, and I'd take action, whatever action I could take to do that.
Admiral, I would suggest that this is a disruptive change in the history of warfare. At the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, there were 4 times as many French as there were English. The English deployed for one of the first times the longbow. It changed the course of European history. This is a similar change, I view. Hypersonic missiles are real. The Russians have one called the Zircon that is proposed to be deployed next year. The Chinese are very close behind. We are woefully inadequate, both in terms of developing this capability ourselves, but more particularly in coping with it. As I mentioned, radar is useless. Infrared sensors is the only way to track. And by the way, these missiles not only travel 6,000 miles an hour, they are maneuverable. So they're not as easy to hit as a ballistic missile, which has a clear and direct trajectory. I believe that this is a place where we have really fallen short. And I'm not talking to you particularly. I'm talking about the entire defense establishment. We're doing research now, but this is a asymmetric vulnerability that we have to address and do so in a hurry. In the long run, probably the only real defense against this awful weapon is, and by the way, these weapons can carry nuclear warheads, is deterrence. But the estimate from the technologists in the Pentagon is we won't be prepared to field our own even anything close or defensive measures until the mid-2020s. The only deterrence is if you have an equal capacity and can inform your adversary, and therefore they won't attack. This is a very dangerous situation in my view that I don't think, and I'm not sounding virtuous here, I don't think any of us have really fully grasped the implications. We've talked about hypersonics, but when you're talking about something coming 6,000 miles an hour that you can't see, that could have a nuclear warhead, that's maneuverable, that's a nightmare weapon.
Yes, sir, I agree.
Well, I hope that as you take on, because this could render, unless we can solve this problem, it renders aircraft carriers obsolete. Every aircraft carrier that we own can disappear in a coordinated attack. And it is a matter of minutes. Murmansk to the Norwegian Sea is 12 minutes at 6,000 miles an hour. So I hope you will take back a sense of urgency to the Navy and to the research capacity and to the private sector that this has to be an urgent priority because otherwise we're creating a vulnerability that could in itself lead to instability.
Yes, sir.
I've been very serious. I want to move to a slightly different topic. In your questions for the record, you indicated that you thought it was in the national interest to accede to the Law of the Sea Convention. Could you tell me why you think that is the case?
Sir, it's long been customary for the United States to recognize the provisions of the UN Law of the Sea that apply to both freedom of navigation as well as overflight. And it would be my intention to continue to follow those provisions.
But if we're just following it, but we're not members of the convention, then other people, we're missing out on the opportunity to participate at the table. For example, when the Russians are trying to establish where the lines are in the Arctic. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Sir, if that comes up for it is a complex policy issue with respect to whether or not we agree to sign on to that treaty. I would provide my best advice to civilian leadership. I would study that issue vigorously and provide my best advice. But
I take it your best advice is reflected in your QFRs where you said, yes, we need to do this.
Yes, sir, that's my feeling is that we continue to follow the provisions of UNCLOS.
You're saying two different things. You're saying, yes, we follow it, but I thought your answer was, yes, we should go to the table.
Yes, sir, it was.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.